We're in the studio tonight with the lovely and bodacious Gabby Francis, whose mom is listening at home. Hello, Mom. Marilyn, right?
Yes.
Where is home?
Stockton.
Is that where you're from?
I am.
I have no idea where Stockton, California is.
Between San Francisco and Sacramento.
Okay. Considering I really don't know where Sacramento is.
We were
either,
just voted the most miserable city in America.
Really?
So, the second time in.
Worse than Newark?
It's Forbes magazine.
Well, I won't say this because people vote, but really, so you're from Stockton. How long have you been in LA?
Over 10 years.
Do you enjoy it?
I love it.
Did you come out here for comedy?
No, I came out here for acting, but with all my afflictions, it wasn't really possible to produce anything.
Right. So how long have you been doing comedy?
I started in 2004 was my very first performance, and then I didn't really get off the ground running except for the last 2 years.
And which is the last, so the last program have you found that, the 12-step programs has helped your comedy?
Oh, well, I didn't even know I was a comedian until I got into the program.
Okay.
Because once you start putting down all these addictions, then you get to find out who you really are.
Right, which is because when you're in the addiction we were talking about before, it's almost like a full-time job.
Yeah.
It's like a 24-hour.
Hard work.
It's hard work. It's hard work.
Yeah.
It's sort of fascinating that you're working for one thing.
Right.
Well, it's the low self-esteem. When you are just completely riddled with low self-esteem, then you don't believe that you can amount to anything, and that's where I was coming from for most of my life. So once I got this idea that I could amount to something and that who I was enough, and that if I just started telling the truth about the fact that I was from Stockton and that I was addicted to all these things and people and blah, 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 then I actually found that I was totally lovable.
Was there something about Stockton that you were embarrassed to admit you were from Stockton, or?
I always thought that my life would be better if I came from a rich family, if my dad wasn't in the military, things like that. But today I am so proud of my family, and I'm actually super proud to be from Stockton because it has to be one of the worst places in the world and the best place to make jokes about. Like, it's awesome.
Has anybody famous come from Stockton other than you, of course?
Chris Isaac.
Mm-hmm. I like Chris Isaac. Actually, played a few songs of his today.
Nick Diaz, the UFC fighter.
I'm not familiar with UFC fighting. If you don't let the body
you're so
hear. Don't let
delicate.
my body fool you. And my dexterity.
Ultra lightweights.
Yes. So
Judah, UFCs with midgets. That's
yes. Andrew, political correctness.
I'm sorry.
Little people.
Oh,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Andrew's not feeling well. He's suffering from typhoid and arsenic combination. But getting back to it, before the break, we were talking about, we're all people pleasers a little bit. We all want to make people happy. And I'm guessing, is that hard when you're performing? Is there a line between wanting to make people happy and making yourself happy? Or is it? Absolutely.
There definitely is a line. And the only way that you learn what the audience wants to hear from you is by doing it. And that's what I had to do. I had to just keep experimenting. And the audience likes to hear me say really ridiculous things at times, and also really intense, true things. And I'm leaning more towards the intense, true things because I think that that's more healing to, the world. And I'd like to think of my comedy as transformational in the sense that I'm bringing my recovery to, the world, really through the back door.
There's so many comics that have come through here so far, and it seems like the one thing that everybody has in common as a comic is that they all have some sort of message they're trying to tell through their comedy. And it's interesting with all the different comics we've had, how they all have this different perspective, but there's some sort of really moral sort of story they're all trying to tell. There's like this narrative that they've created, and they're trying to tell you that narrative and lead you to be with them.
Well, as a writer, Lowell, I mean, do you feel like where you've led readers has changed, where you want to lead readers has changed in like the last 20, in a sense that you feel a more moral responsibility? You stop writing crime fiction. You've written, scripts, you've written pilots for TV shows. Do you feel the difference in the writing
Yeah, in the beginning of my true crime career, it was more about exploring evil, what the nature of evil was. And in fact, that's what got me into my first book, was that as I got into recovery, I thought, what's wrong with me? How am I any different than these? Why did I not go out and kill somebody?
What are morals and where do they come from?
Yeah, and all that. And so a lot of my early books were exploring those little decisions that people make in their life that take them from just neurotic or resentful to homicidal. Because I wanted to know where that
the hop, skip, and where that line is.
I wanted to know where the line was in myself.
See, I'm a big believer that people have a narrative in their head, that they have a story in their head that they believe about themselves and that they're acting out on.
Right.
So did you find that with people that you wrote about, that they had sort of a conceived idea of who and what they were, and they were playing off that idea in their head? Or do you think they were driven by impulses?
I
got to tell you, that's a great question.
Well, I think they were driven by, they let their impulses get away from them, and they begin to chip away at the guardrails within themselves. And criminals, they start out small and they just begin to take away the guardrails, and it finally gets to the point where homicide seems like a good solution.
Right.
And
a viable one.
Well, because there are differences between Dahmers and people that are just
there's people with personality disorders, like narcissistic personality disorders, psychopathic personality disorder, those kind of things. And so once I got that taken care of in those earlier books, now I come from a place where I want to take characters kind of down to the bone and show that we're all having different versions of the same experience, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Because we really all are having different versions of the same experience. It's all about fear. It's about security. It's about what Gabby's been talking about. It's about being okay with the self in different ways to get there. And so my writing has gone more towards that.
Do you have anything coming up, or?
I'm out pitching actually a couple of shows right now. I had a show that was sold to NBC last year that didn't get picked up. The great thing about LA is they'll pay you a lot of money to write shows that never get picked up. So it
used to be more so, right?
It pays the bills. But I've got a book. All my books are still in print. But my last nonfiction book, called The House of Secrets, is in its 20th printing. It was a New York Times bestseller.
What was it about?
It was about a very, very sick, dysfunctional family of 13 kids and a patriarch who, very dark. It's a very dark story. They go on a cross-country crime spree.
Well,
and
what's amazing is that could almost be comedy. There's a really, a family going across.
Especially the fact they were in a 24-foot motorhome. You imagine 13 people living in a 24-foot motorhome. Yeah, it was very crazy.
Only in 1967.
Yeah, but that was actually my last true crime book. That took me to a very dark place, and I was done with it after that because it was so dark. But yeah, one of the things, there is such a thing as evil. I mean, that last book that I did really convinced me that there are people who are just
there's no redeeming quality.
Yeah, no redeeming quality, irretrievable. Their main purpose is to completely feed themselves. I love M. Scott Peck's definition of evil, and that is the wielding of power in any form, whether it be financial, emotional, physical, to keep one from examining themselves. And that's one thing.
Which is really the antithesis, or is direct opposite of any 12-step program.
Right, which is about examining yourself and taking responsibility for your side of the street.
And Gabby, where can we see you performing?
Well, you can see me performing. I've just gotten off a pretty long run of doing a lot of shows, so I'm actually on a little bit of a break right now. But I wasn't even prepared to do it.
Website?
It's Facebook.
Facebook, and how do we? Gabby Francis?
No.
Gabriella.
Gift of Gabriella.
Gift of Gabriella?
Yeah.
That's a great.
Well, Gift of Gab was taken.
You're like all spiritual and stuff. It's like
it's had a lot of steps to get there.
A lot of steps. I mean, that's 48 steps to spirituality. That should be your.
One question I have actually about that, because I'm sure that more cynical person would be like, if it's 12 steps and you're in one program, why can't you just apply that to them all? why is one 12-step program different than another? Why is it important to, if you examine yourself through a series of 112 steps, shouldn't you just be a 12-step and then it's over?
No, because you really have to admit the powerlessness over that one particular thing, and it's, again, I just think it's very finite, and
I have to be honest, by the way, I think it takes a lot more courage to join the 12-step groups that you've joined, because it's not the cool ones.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not the, hey, I'm in AA, you know, or hey, I'm in A, you know, you're like, hey, I'm in OA, I'm in Al-Anon, I'm in Debtors Anonymous,
heroin addicts are cool,
and I'm in Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous.
It's totally true.
You don't discuss at a dinner conversation when everybody's, it's the old thing, you know, it's like, it always drives me crazy when people say a drug is a drug is a drug is a drug. Really, the next time you're at a dinner party and everybody's having wine, pull out cocaine and say, drug is a drug is a drug. And you're in one of those things where it takes a lot of courage to admit that. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. To say, you know, to say those things, because that's pretty cool.
But it is true. I do feel really inadequate in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I did stop drinking in July, but
so do I.
Because I really want to fit in, actually, and so I just stopped drinking. No, but
shake your head a lot.
No, but I want to feel like I fit in. I want to participate, and I do feel like I wish that I was an alcoholic, because I would just like to identify with alcoholics.
Well, I think that's the hardest thing. And you were talking about your father, you were talking about family stuff, and the hardest thing, I have a great relationship with my father, but the hardest thing about anything that's not alcoholism or drug addiction is that if you're an alcoholic or you're a drug addict, you could say, oh, it's the alcohol and the drugs that are making that person who they are. But if you're just a mean workaholic, if you're just an angry person that doesn't drink, then you can't label it. And I think it's really hard sometimes when you can't label that.
Well, to Gabby's point,
but we can't mention that name on the air.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Well, to Gabby's point, though, I wanted to just mention that there's a difference between identifying directly with somebody through sympathizing with them because it's similar to you, and then also being able to relate to them with empathy. Right? You don't necessarily have to have cancer to be able to empathize with the person that's suffering with cancer.
Not at all. Right. Yeah. That's just a commitment to humanity, really, and I think that I am a very empathetic person, just by nature. I've always been like that since a child, and I think that the person I needed the most empathy for was myself, and once I got that, then I can truly be of service. I can truly be there for you, and for you, Judah, even though you have that name.
You're a kind soul.
So one of the things that I see in treatment and with therapists is that, especially younger therapists when they start out, is that they tend to center on working with the type of therapy that they have their own problem with, and so it's interesting to hear your comment. We're just about done here,
and we would like to thank Lowell Cauffiel for coming into the studio tonight. You can find him at Lowell Cauffiel at Facebook, and read his spectacular blogs, and you could find
all my books are available on Amazon.com.
And Amazon.com, not Amazon.com UK. It's Amazon.com. And Gabby Francis, The Gift of Gabby.
Gift of Gabriella.
The Gift of Gabriella.
Next time,
and you can find Andrew and I nowhere that spectacular as these two to our left and right.
On KLEANradio.com.
Is that it?
KLEANradio.com?
KLEANradio.com. KLEAN.
It's been our pleasure. It's been my pleasure. It's been great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming down.
Thanks, you guys, so much.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you in here and talk to you next week.